Here we go. Okay, Shalom Uvracha, dear Chaberot. Welcome to our next Heliga Shabbos Chabura. Today we're going to do a one-time, very unique exploration of masks. Okay, what exactly? We'll ask a few questions. Masks. Okay, so maybe it relates to Purim, the idea of wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, right? Malka Esther, the whole mitzvah of Esther and Hester Panim, fine. The last year or two, the word masks has certainly taken on a very different kind of meaning. For some people, it's a safeguard. For other people, it's a muzzle, not a good muzzle. And other people, it's a prison. So we'll have to see what exactly is going on as well. There's a beautiful reference to masks, believe it or not, in the beginning of last week's Parsha. So we're going to do about a 5 or 6 minute Chumash shir. So again, it's something we don't typically do, but it'll be very important for understanding what masks are. We'll be referencing something in Parshas Vayikra last week, and also in Parshas Kisisa. Okay, and then after that, we'll have lots of opportunity for discussion and pushing people's buttons deliberately, but not in a harsh way, just in a very thoughtful way, because it's very provocative what it's saying in Chumash. It's really just very fascinating. So I'm sharing with my dear friends. Okay, anyways, no more caveats. I guess we'll date it today. The date today is Yud Aleph, Adar Beis, and March 14th. Okay. So it goes as follows. This last few years, when Corona was brought to the world, right, Hashem was giving the world the big hisayrus, a very big awakening. And however you take it, in whatever way it means, we're not even so much going to be talking about that. But one thing in particular, wearing a mask really did a number in the world. And I'd like to share it for a minute what that means, because again, it's going to tie into Purim, Chumash, and what we're going to say about it. One of the few times we ever really had to conceal our panim. We had to be master our panim, to conceal it from within ourselves, to conceal it within others, to the point you could be talking with someone relatively close to you and not know who they are. Oh, I didn't recognize you. Husband, wife, sibling, parent, close friend. I didn't recognize you with your mask on, especially as one of these massive masks or the ones with all the insignia. Very strange thing. Then if you're davening with people with masks, very disconnecting from other people. You're going to stores where you don't recognize people, everything very impersonal, very detached, never mind hard to breathe and everything else. But it really put a very deep sense of pirut, a very deep sense of separateness within ourselves and others in the world. And I have to tell you, I do not think we've recovered. I think we've gotten worse. Whether you're in places now that wear masks, because you must because of government mandates, or you're in places that are even more stringent martial law, or they're in places who could care less. Where are we with all this? And what does it really mean to you? And how, thank you. And since we're talking about masks, yeah. And how are you really affected by it? And I want you to really think about it, because it's not a simple thing to really grasp and what the depth of it is. I'm going to share one story that really had an impact on me, and it's going to be the lead-in into our topic today. After about a year of wearing masks, we went to Lakewood, HaKodesh, and no one was wearing masks. It was just almost like shocking, like you went to a different planet. Like the world is dealing supposedly with Corona, and there it's like Torah and Tefillah, connecting to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that's it. I remember taking off my mask, feeling like I'm ripping off my own imposter, like just pulling off and going, now this fake facade can be taken off. And now I can finally be who I am. And that whole Shabbos was just so liberating. I had one of the most profound learnings and davenings Shabbos I've ever had in my life. It was extreme, because the awakening of deep concealment and then removing was an incredible thing, like truly. Then we came back to Cleveland, and I just said to my wife, I can't do it anymore. She's like, what does that mean? Especially when I say provocative things like that. I can't wear a mask. Well, everyone's pretty wearing masks. Well, I can't go to a shul. I'm going to go to Armenian. And I decided not to wear a mask. Well, needless to say, that didn't go over well. Approached by the president, the board members. And I said, I came here to daven. I'm deep in the corner. No one's within 6 feet. Just let me pray to Hashem. Labinsky, you got to wear a mask. I just can't. I know you don't understand, but I feel so restricted in my own davening with the knee into Kadosh Baruch Hu. I just came back from, I can't. I really wholeheartedly, panim al panim, face to face, want to pour my heart out. And this mask restricts me, fogging up the glasses, hot breath, muffling the words, just closing for myself. I can't. I feel trapped in myself. And I was just liberated. And it was long and shorter. After a week, they let the Labinsky non-masking section take place. And a week later, the minyan voted to have an optional for that. And then things flipped from there. And I told people, I'm not anti-masking. I'm pro-davening. So if you want to just be in the corner with me because you don't want to wear a mask, please go somewhere else. If you want to be in this corner to be unmasked, and let's daven our hearts out to Kadosh Baruch Hu even more so, now we have what to talk about. So with that story, we're going to explain a very important Arizal on last week's Parsha. The Parsha starts out by Yikra El Moshe, and Hashem called to Moshe. And there's this little small aleph called the aleph Zeira. It's a very tiny, diminished aleph. And there are many, many explanations. It's not too often you get to hear something straight from the Arizal, and he says it beferish explicitly at this level, and it's an incredible thing. So I'm just going to it's going to be a 5-minute chumash here. We're going to bring it into practical terms and then make it as real as possible. The Arizal says as follows. This is in his sefer called Shar HaPsukim, on his commentary on Chumash in Parshas Vayikra, and then we'll be referencing a comment on Parshas Kisisa. So the Arizal says as follows. What is the aleph diminished? You know what the aleph is, he says? The aleph is actually a reference to Klal Yisrael falling from their supreme level of being connected to Kadosh Baruch Hu in a sense pre-Adam, pre-Chet Adam Arishon, pre-transgression from Adam Arishon, sinning in the world. That when Klal Yisrael got the Ksarim, the special crowns of Torah at Har Sinai, they reached a level of tikkun, of ultimate correction from pre-Gan Eden, an amazing thing. Comes the Ched Ego, comes the actual sin of the golden calf. And again, we're leaving that one to the side, other than just to give it context. At that point, Klal Yisrael felt extreme levels of divine light. So what happened? So the Arizal says this aleph, believe it or not, is actually a reference to that falling. How on earth would you come up with that? So the Arizal says an incredible thing as follows. The aleph, when you sound it out, aleph is aleph lamed fei. It's called milui. So if you say the letter aleph, the whole verb is aleph lamed fei. And the gematria of aleph lamed fei is 111. And the Arizal connects that to 2 parshas before, when it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu coming down from Har Sinai and wearing a masve, a mask. The Hebrew word masve, mask, is a gematria 111. Okay, what on earth? And again, there's a lot of deep Torah here, but we're saying in very simple terms, just to make it really clear. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to wear a mask? Why is it the gematria 111? And what does this have to do with this diminished aleph in the beginning of Vayikra? And he explains as follows. Once or before Klal Yisrael sinned, they got a very high level of light on the word aluf, or actually aleph, or aleph rather, it's all the different vowelizations. Aleph means 1,000. They were meritorious of 1,000 levels of pure light, right? So aleph lamed fei also has the phonetics of aleph, which means 1,000. When Klal Yisrael transgressed, the Chet Ego was so immense. They lost 999 portions of that divine light. And that last bit of light wasn't theirs. It belonged to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Kliyak, the Chasam Sofer references what this Aleph was, that Moshe Rabbeinu was so humble that he didn't want to be directly mentioned. So it says Vayakar, means his precious one. So what does this Aleph mean? Somehow this Aleph is a reference to Klal Yisrael that was at the Spitz, the highest level of divine revelation at Har Sinai. They sinned, they fell, they lost 999 portions of tremendous divine light in creation, and the one portion that was diminished, hence the small Aleph, went to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayakar, who was the precious one. So what does this have to do with the Masveh? So the Arizal connects that 2 parshas back and says that Aleph again, B'milui, Aleph Lamed Fei, is 111. And 111 equals the Gematria Masveh. What's the connection? So he explains as follows. You know what? You want to know what the Masveh was? It did 2 things. It shielded Klal Yisrael, and it preserved Moshe Rabbeinu within himself. What does it mean, shield Klal Yisrael? Once they had the chait from the Egel, they were not able to perceive HaKadosh Baruch Hu's supernal light that came from Har Sinai. And therefore, for them, the mask was a separation, a barrier that prevented them from seeing the full true light that shone on Moshe Rabbeinu's face. They were not zoicha, they were not meritorious to perceive that light. So for them, the masveh was their falling, their yerida, keeping away from the divine light that they lost, that they fell from, which is obviously tragic in the most extreme, because in every generation, Chazal tell us that a little bit of the chait of the ego is being paid for, because it was so immense for Klal Yisrael, we would have been wiped out. So instead of HaKadosh Baruch Hu diminished over time, fine. So for them, the mask was a barrier that prevented them from accessing this tremendous supernal divine light that they had by Har Sinai, okay? By Moshe Rabbeinu, the exact opposite. For him, it kept the divine light in. That divine supernal light, he didn't lose one portion of it. His was not diminished, Klal Yisrael's was. So the 999 from the word Elef, 1,000, minus 999 is 1. So the Aleph Zeir, the small Aleph, is what? The one portion of light that says Moshe Rabbeinu got all the divine light from Har Sinai. He never lost anything, while Klal Yisrael did. And what is that embodied in? The masveh, the mask. So what's the connection? How does it work? So he explains the masveh is Gematria 111, which connects us to the milui of the Aleph in Parshas Vayikra. What's the connection? So since this Aleph is Vayikra is Moshe Rabbeinu having held on to the divine light, that means even when Klal Yisrael fell, the leader was preserved. And somehow he had to be connected to Klal Yisrael and be separate at the same time. And they had to be connected to Moshe Rabbeinu and be at their own place where they were holding. So the Masveh had this dual purpose of keeping out and keeping in at the same time. That on the one hand, for Klal Yisrael, they fell tremendously. They were no longer able to perceive this incredible divine light through Moshe Rabbeinu. The mask represented the barrier of perception. They were no longer able to perceive this high-level light that once was. And of course, the tragedy they would feel instantly would be immense. But relative to Moshe Rabbeinu, right, the Masveh, 111, the letters Aleph, Aleph Lamed Fei, B'milui, which connects you to the Aleph, Chazal tell us, he never lost it. So the mask really had, actually the Masveh had 2 dual purposes. It kept out to show lowering, but it also kept in. So that's very fascinating. The last thing we're going to say is, and then we're going to get to what does this mean for us? Where is there an additional reference in last week's Parsha, right? Sefer Vayikra and also Parshas Vayikra. There are 111 psukim, mind-blowing. I have to tell you, it's incredible. So the 111 is the milui of Aleph, is a reference to the Aleph that's diminished in Vayikra. And that milui of Aleph 111 goes back to the Gematria of Masveh, says the Arizal, 2 parshas before, which is connecting the Chita Ego, the falling of Klal Yisrael, the necessity to have a barrier in the world, which reflected a falling for Klal Yisrael, and an inner preservation of that supernal light within Moshe Rabbeinu all at the same time, which meant he was still going to be the beacon of light to keep Klal Yisrael connected even in their fallen state. Okay, so now let's go back here. What on earth, and there's a lot of depth, I'm just saying it very superficially because there's a lot of reference to each of the four letters, what it means perhaps in the discussion, we'll bring it out. So what does this have to do with us? So we see a mask on one level represents a fallen state. It means a concealment. And again, the costumes in Purim, the concealment, the Hester, and ultimately in our generation, a mask has a dual purpose, but we're going to stay with the first part. A concealment means you're hiding from yourself and you're hiding from others. You're shut down from others in a limited way. You're distant from others and yourself. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mida Keneged Mida gave us corona as the truncated form of to coronate him, if we're not going to coronate him to reveal his divine presence, then we're going to get this the shortened version, which is corona. And in corona, one of the branches of that will be, for our correction, is to wear a mask. And what is that mask about? Hashem says, you know what? You cause great Hester Panim in the world. Ultimately, Klal Yisrael, because the Gemara in Yavama says, Ein Puranis Ba'lo Elam Ela B'Yishvil Yisrael. There are no sufferings that comes to the world except for Klal Yisrael, which means if we're using the mask as both the problem, the yerida, the falling, but also as the potential for tikkun, then we have to see that we are bringing that reality of masking to this world, that we have to have a disdain for it on the one hand, even for those who may say it is healthy or not, it does protect or not, we're staying away from it, not getting into it. But it means is the mask creates separation from us and others, us within ourselves and us in the Kadosh Baruch, which means it can be a good thing. And yet, if we look at the mask the right way, we will see that it's meant to bring us to a tshuva, an inner return, an inner tikkun. Why? Because by having a disdain for a mask, when you should, by the way, because when you feel disconnected from others, yourself, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and all of existence is relationship, you should have a disdain for that which takes us out of reality, plain and simple, even if it's called beneficial, perhaps. It compromises our davening, our learning, forget the breathing and all the physical things. So this reality of Hester Panim for Klal Yisrael represented a very, very deep falling, very deep falling. And yet it's supposed to awaken us to a tshuva, a correction, a tikkun. Why? Because if we can feel the pain of being distant from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, where we can't talk to you so clearly, Tati, when we're davening, and we can't even recognize other people, and we feel very separate, and we feel very different. And then when we get used to putting on ourselves, you're almost like detached from yourself. That should cause you tsar. And the tsar should awaken a new ratzon of wanting to return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that the problem also creates a solution to return back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a more sincere way, in a more authentic way, in a more healthy way, in a more vital way. Like you say, unapologetically, Tati, we've fallen from you. Tati, we're so distant and separate from others. We're so lonely. We're so isolated. We're so detached. Tati, we've fallen away from ourselves. Like, where are we? What are we doing? And it's not just the physical mask. It's the mask of the ego that's convincing us of our own humanness, which is boring, and the Hester Panim, that we're stuck in this galactic state. And we're trapped in ourselves. And we're fallen from others. And we're so detached from you. And it sickens us and it pains us. This masva must have been torture to Klal Yisrael. They couldn't see the face of Moshe Rabbeinu. They couldn't see the Shekhinah from the higher realm that came from Har Sinai and from his ascension from the higher worlds. And they were stuck in a physical world. Torture. And yet, when they knew Moshe Rabbeinu were the masva, they knew he was still connected. And when he left Klal Yisrael and he removed that, the supernal light was on him in the Oil Moed. And therefore, we see an incredible thing. The very mask that hides and the pain of the distancing could awaken a very deep, profound, ultimate yearning, burning yearning to return to ourselves in a godly way, to our fellow Jew with deep love, deep passion, deep caring, and a profound yearning to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the very reality of unmasking is to create a profound awakening of wanting to return in a more full way, in a more complete and more holistic way, in a more unyielding way that says we want no barriers between us and our fellow Jew, between you, Tati, and within ourselves, nothing. And this Hester Panim, this Masve that we caused by the Chetza Ego and that we caused in our generation, we're going to use it to unmask, and not just to say, oh, okay, good now. Oh, my beard, okay, now it's not as squashed. Or my face isn't as dry now. I don't have to add as much cream because I've dried out. Or my teeth aren't so because of the taste. No, feel the spiritual reality of unmasking, the ultimate yearning that the Panim wants to go Panim al Panim with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the most unhindered, all engrossed way with a Kadosh Baruch Hu, with your fellow Yidden, to connect Panim al Panim, to really love every Jew, mamish, but not as they are for you, as they are, and connect to them, Panim, and be willing to see your inner panemius. So how do we get that from Moshe Rabbeinu? Where does he get that from? Unbelievable. So without going too deep, he explains that the Mem and Samech is Gematria. Mem is 40, Samech is 60, which is Gematria 100. That represents Shleimus. That was the light of coming from Bina, from the higher worlds, coming into the Vav Hey, which is in the mask. That was the lower 6 Sfirot, the Vav, into the Hey, the Malchus. Moshe Rabbeinu maintained that higher connection to the higher worlds when he came down. Right in the Olam Habriya, which was Bina, he connected to Atzil. He brought that light down. He never detached. Thank you, Tati, in ultimate kindness. Moshe Rabbeinu held on to that supernal light, and it kept very strong on the inside. And the diminished Aleph is a reminder that he preserved that for all Klal Yisrael. And that little Aleph in us is the inner Elokus, that spark of godliness that cannot be diminished and demands to be ignited in the greatest way. And it takes the very reality of the mask and masking and says, enough, I don't want this. I don't want any of your concealment in this world. Tati, we want your fullest glory in us with others, and no inhibitions, no barriers, nothing, absolutely nothing. So the Mem and Samech of Masve, we want full 100, we want full complete revelation, and then to come into the Vav Hey, so that the 111, which is Gematria Masve, is the Milui of Aleph Lamed Fei, which is the diminished Aleph in Vayikra. So we can be Vayakar, we can be precious to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And the full scope of the Korbanos that kicked off in Sefer Vayikra, 111 psukim, which reference this Aleph. Unbelievable. Thank you, Tati, for sending the Ariya Kodesh to open up your Moyerdek Torah and to reveal such profound truths as it relates to Purim, as it relates to the reality of Corona, and as it relates to our human condition. Our very human condition is one Gansa mask. And we can think, oh, we wear masks. That's what we do, whether it's government mandated or martial law or suggested, or if you're going to be a little bit rebellious, or you're places where it once was something called the mask. Wherever it is, and if you need to wear it for whatever reason, gazun, you should be protected, healthy, and well. But the spiritual reality of a mask, you must be bothered to the depths of your soul, because the mask is the unrectified form of Hester Panim that really conceals HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. That's the depth of what we saw in Corona. And the lingering effects are beyond still there. They are still so epically strong. And we have to take that falling out and the distance from each other within ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be inspired by this diminished Aleph Vayikra, by the Masva and a few Parshios Agoy. And as we inaugurate the whole Metzias of Korbanos, drawing close to Kadosh Baruch Hu without barrier. And there's always some degree of limitation, but we want the fullest degree of connection possible that we can have in the most unhindered way. We don't want to glorify separateness and distance and disconnection. No, Tati. We want to transform it in every way possible. And that the masve, unmasked, is our way of saying, we want your fullest light as much as it can shine brilliantly and brightly on Purim, where it can shine right through the physical world, says the Arizal in Shar Kavanas in the first drush in the Kavanas of Purim. This is the one time of year that the holiday is so kadosh that we don't even need Isser Malach. We don't even need the forbiddenness of Malacha like we would on Shabbos every week, on Yom Tov. You have to connect to the Kedusha by detaching from the Shinui Chumris, changing or restructuring the physical world. Masha Ein Kain, not so by Purim, where Purim, the veil is not just uplifted, it's shone right through, that it's like a very bright flashlight shining through a very thin sheet. And the sheet is transparent, so translucent, it's like the sheet's not even there. That's why there's no Isser Malacha on Purim. That's how bright this light, Mirz Hashem, will be shining on Purim relative to our fast as preparation for that. And from the last few years, looking deep into our souls, but what a masva is, how it's concealed us from ourselves, others, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and yet coming back to that diminished Aleph. The letter Aleph, the Milui 111, connecting to the Gematria Masva, which meant for Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't concealment. It was keeping in that supernal light that the Klal Yisrael was not Zeicha to, but he was as the manhig, as the leader for Klal Yisrael. And therefore, going into Purim, and we'll close with this, we have to ask ourselves that very question. To what extent are we masking from ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, hiding from our true, genuine, ultimate divine being, at whatever level you're holding by? And on the one hand, you have to see the masks, the berries that are there. And from the very depths of your being, you must pour your heart out to Kadosh Baruch Hu and ask him to remove these veils of concealment, these veils of hiddenness, these veils of deception, and saying, Tati, it seems like we're a human being, but we're a divine becoming. And we really want to reveal your divine light in the truest way, because that's our truest identity. We want to give up these masks in the deepest sense, which is why we wear masks and costumes in Purim, to make schlik, to make jest of the reality of Hester Panim itself, and that we want to sanctify it so that it itself can be a veil that now becomes a veneer to reveal without any barriers. That's the inner desire that we go into the fast on Purim. And from these last 2 years, that's what my soul, I'm telling you, when we left Lakewood, coming back to Cleveland, it was this resounding, unyielding sense of no more masking from your Tati, not within myself, not within davening. Can't do it. I don't care what you're going to call it, health reasons. Really, the soul can get much more sick than the body ever can, right? Sick if we fall out from ourself or elokus, sick when we don't connect to others and we're very detached and isolated, and sick from you. But when we unmask and we really reveal the true divine essence, what we are on the inside, then the mask actually reveals itself. And the Mem Samach 100 is the full revelation of your divine light from above, down below into the lower parts, the Vav and He of Shem Havaya, which is the lower seven spheres, so that the Elyon, the upper levels, can actually fully be revealed down below. No barriers, nothing, full all the way down. And therefore, the very thing that hides will be the thing that fully reveals. And that's what our soul wants. It's not that we're anti-masking. We're just pro-Shechina. We're pro-divine glory in the greatest way. That's what we want. That's what we yearn for. And that's the depth and the secret, the true real secret, says the Arizal, of what a masva is, this dual reality it hides and can reveal. When Moshe Rabbeinu taught us, when he went up and ascended, when he brought the supernal light down, that ultimately is meant to be for Klal Yisrael. And in Parshas Vayikra, Sefer Vayikra, going all the way through now, in Tzav Shmini, we're getting back to that light in an uncompromising way. You can be as stubborn as you want for that light, all out. And when we go into Purim, we confront these last 2 years of Corona. We're saying enough of Corona, Tati. We want to coronate you. We want to mamlich you. We want your divine glory to shine brilliantly through this from the high worlds all the way down. No barriers, total transparency. And for us to do that, we have to make sure we are that way, that we remove those barriers in ourselves. We remove the external mask. And I think a cute way, it just came to my mind, take it for what it's worth. The Arizal does not say this, I can assure you. Mask is for the M, must ask. So mask means you must ask for a Kadosh Baruch Hu. You have to pour your heart out in prayer and say, Mem, M, ask. We must ask our Tati for divine help, divine assistance, to remove all these forms of hiddenness, to bring out the Vayakar, the inner preciousness of our Elokus, the preciousness between the love of another Yid, real Avos Reim. That's what all the mitzvahs are about, to remove the impoverishment in this world, to bring total abundance, Ashiras from the word Eser, 10 chapters in Megillah, to bring the light of the Megillah into this world, to reveal complete, to awaken Avos Reim, a deep, profound love for your fellow Jew, Mamish Kamoicha. Fall in love with such an intensity, be absolutely exuberant with every Jew you meet. Give the tzedakah, give the matanas le'avyon, give the shalach manas. And when you eat that seuda, eat it like it's mamish food that's being eaten in the Beis Hamikdash, mamish, and saying no more masks. I want your full light in this world, Tati. I want the 111. I want the Aleph b'milui. I want your Aleph fully expressed in this world, complete, total, everywhere. I want the 111 psukim of Vayikra. I want to be precious to you in every way. And if we go into Purim with that, into the Tainus, we can look back at Corona and say, Hayina kecholmim. It was a dream, a nightmare. And these masks, as relates to Purim, as relates to what we've had to deal with to try and secure our health, the masks of our ego, and the mask of Hester Panim in this physical world, and ultimately the mask of the Tzimtzum itself of creation. We're saying no more masking.